When do you give up on chasing prospects that really have no desire to work with you? Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Logistics Life. Today, I want to talk about, I think, a topic that most of us as salespeople struggle with, especially a little early on in our career. As we get into sales over and over and over again and year after year, I find it gets a little easier and our perspective changes. But for a lot of you, I've had a lot of questions lately about, Dan, when do I give up chasing something? And I don't know necessarily. I've researched this. I've looked on, the YouTubes of the world. I've done the GPT searches. I've done all of it. And there's so much conflicting information, right? Some people, like if you listen to Gary Vee, for example, Gary Vee's philosophy is and always has been, I'm never going to try and convince somebody that they need whatever I'm selling. If they need it, that's great. And then I'll move on. I love that approach. There's also the approach where some people don't even know that they really need the product because they're not problem aware. And then when you dive into like the hero's 3 journeys, or you dive into, a value ladder sequence, or all these other things, there's all these other aspects and little tiny pieces that get sprinkled in everywhere. So I don't know if there's necessarily a, 100%, this is the way you should do it for everybody. I don't believe there is. I believe us as individuals and the way we work, the way we prospect, what we want, our overall goals and desires all play a huge role. I can tell you this, that in my career, when I first started, I would literally prospect or follow up, I guess, for lack of a better term, until the person said, get the fuck out of here. Like, stop bugging me, or we moved forward. Later on in my career, I started looking at things and saying, okay, well, I have a specific client profile. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to prospect to this client profile. If they do not meet the client profile, I'm moving on. And that's another process. Then there's the process, like Gary Vee said, where I'm going to come to you. Here's what I got. You interested? No. Have a great day. And you move on. So there's all these different processes. And I was recently having a conversation. I'm sure I've said this, shared this with you all before. So because of everything I've been through over the last couple of years, my voice tends to get really weak by midday if I'm speaking too much. So I really had to focus on email sales. So in this one community I'm in, the person that runs a community, they have a lead generation company, like a PR company, and they do 3 emails. And what they do is their whole process is a 3-step process. If you're not interested by 3, they move on. And there's something to be said about that, right? Because as you know, when we're in sales, for the most part, sales is a numbers game, right? You make 4 calls a day, you send 4 emails a day. You're not going to get as much traction. You're not going to get as many results as somebody doing 100. It's just what it is. So no matter where we are in this perspective of business, we have to always remember that it's the volume that gets us where we're going. Yeah. Yes, you do hit prospects at a certain time when they have, an X amount of issues going on and, the right time, right place. There is that. But in the end, it's a volume game. So when I'm asking the question, I'm saying, well, why 3? And they're saying, well, because I want to move through as many new prospects as possible in order to find the ones that want to work with me. And when you think about that for a second, I think it's a really good approach. But then again, if you do any type of research or you've read any books on sales, it's, they have this process where salespeople follow up 3 times. After 3 times, 30% of people are left. And after 5 times, 4% of people are left. And after 6, it's 1% or whatever those numbers are. And I can tell you, when it comes to people soliciting me, I personally do not reply in any which way. No, let me rephrase that. I apologize. If it's something I'm not specifically looking for right now, right, I will not reply until at least 5 or 6 times. And some people have said, well, why, Dan? Why do you do that? Because I want to weed out the amateurs from the pros. So there's that aspect. And do other people follow that philosophy? Possibly. I hope they do, to be honest with you, because I think that it's a philosophy that we really should adopt in order to really become the best version of ourselves. And I don't know, to me, that's how I operate. You know, on the flip side, I'm also in sales, right? So I would like people to raise their hand and say, yes, I'm interested in the first phone call with the first email. It just doesn't happen. So it's not as easy as, hey, Dan, you know, what is it that I should be doing, or how should I be following up? How many times should I follow up? So here's the perspective that I operate in, and hopefully it adds some value, or even just gives you a little clarity, a little perspective on what it is when it comes to this idea of follow-up. So what I do is, if there's interest, I will follow up 3 to 4 times. That's if somebody shows interest. So like, for example, you have a phone call, you sit with the prospects, you kind of lay out the map, and they're like, you know what, this is awesome. Yes. You know, and this happens all the time. And you guys have all, you know, y'all have seen it, where, you know, everything's in cool. You're like, okay, we're going to start. And then something comes up and they have this perspective of getting busy and they have no time for it. Now, depending on where you are, like what industry you're in when it comes to, you know, commodities, or, you know, how you're positioning yourself, there's 2 ways I look at that. You know, when it comes to my training and when it comes to the business consulting aspect of it, when we get to that point and it's almost where, you know, people are signing on the dotted line and something doesn't happen and there's no signing on the dotted line, I know a priorities come up. Now, call a spade again. A lot of those priorities are fictitious priorities, because when people decide to grow their business, they should be all in on growing their business, meaning they're going to have to block the, you know, false priorities or false emergencies out. And I don't believe a lot of people understand how many false emergencies they actually get caught up in a day. Like, it's something where, I mean, I can tell you from my own personal experience, I never realized it until I started doing a ton of personal work on what's a false emergency and what really matters today, and why does it matter, and how does it matter, and what's the end result, and what's going to, and, you know, our CTO, Julian, has been a huge person in that respect, where when I say, okay, I'm thinking about this, and he says, well, what is it this for? What is it for? What is the outcome? What does it do? Why does it do it? And it's all these things that I never really even thought through. And because I never thought through them, I don't know. And it's kind of like, oh, interesting. I have no idea. So was that a really good idea? And so we as business owners, and as we get further into this, I'm going to delve more into what we're doing as a corporation and how we're building, because I really want y'all to come along for the ride. But the idea is, you know, a lot of people that you meet on a day-to-day basis, that you prospect on a day-to-day basis, are going to have all these false emergencies that in their mind, it's like, it's got to happen. It's got to be fixed. So you're not going to be able to change that. And that's one thing I realized, because as you grow in perspective and as you grow in awareness and, you know, just that side ability to really dissect what's going on in your brain and what's going on in your business at the flash of a second, that takes training. Not very many people have done it. And you've probably had that with prospects, where you know the value you're bringing to the table. You know everything you're doing is the right move for them because you've seen it. Maybe you've been to the point where, I mean, I can recall, man, so many times where customers were like, okay, you know, we set all this up. We have all the data. We've shown them. Like, there's been companies I've shown millions of dollars in savings just because there was leaks in their supply chain everywhere. And we're not talking, you know, going in and cutting rates. Like, we're talking, listen, if you do this, I can guarantee you, to the point where I'm ready to cut you a check, that we could save you this many millions. That point, my friends, like, this is what I'm getting at here. And then it's like something happens. It's like, oh, I need to take care of this problem. And I remember saying to a prospect one day, I said, you know what, with all due respect, I literally put, I think it was like 1.96 million in savings, guaranteed on the table. And this thing here that you're talking about is a priority? How is that possible? And I remember the prospect stopping and going, Dan, because in my opinion, at that point in time in my career, I couldn't understand people's perspective, right? Because it was like, this is what you want in your business, in your department. This is what I can give you. Why in the hell are we not moving forward? And I remember this gentleman saying something to me, and it stuck with me because it was one of these things. He says, that is a priority, but in order to get it done, it's going to take twice my time. And you know what? If I leave this to jump on with you and I leave this situation, it's going to become a like Goliath situation. Right now, it's a situation I can solve in a week. If I leave this and do the onboarding with you, which we knew would take, so to give you some context, we knew it would take, 3 to 5 weeks to kind of set everything up. He goes, in that time period, it's going to be a gong show, like a dog's breakfast. He goes, and it will probably hurt what we're doing. So what I didn't understand, and the point of this particular story is, I didn't understand how when I'm offering up X, Y, and Z, which is the actual piece of the pie that you're missing, where you want to go, how you want to do it, what your goals and mandates are, why are you not acting on it now? And sometimes there's that piece of the puzzle that we don't understand from our position. And that's why it's imperative that we do a deep dive with every prospect. Because, I'm sure you've been there. I know I've been there. Talks are going great, and all of a sudden the person disappears, right? And it's like, okay, hold on. What the hell did I do? Well, like, what the hell did I do? And you start really second guessing yourself and saying, okay, did I do this? Did that? And I remember we were setting a company up with 12 people to go into my training program, and everything was great. The deal was done. It's literally just, here's your link. Let me know. And ghosted. I was like, what the hell did I do? To the point where I remember texting the individual, and if the individual's watching, you'll know who you are, saying, hey, listen, like, if I did something, I apologize, but I've reached out to you like 4 times. You're just ghosting. Like, there's, sorry if I've done something. I'd really like an opportunity to fix it. And getting back to me, he's like, no, sorry, man, we just had a major problem we had to do, and they block everything out. So it's not as easy as saying, here's the answer for all of you. And again, I'll kind of now circle back to the main point I was making before I got into all those stories was, here's my process. If we have that initial call and everything is good, and then I follow up because maybe the start date or something is supposed to happen and it's getting close and I haven't heard anything, and I follow up and it's an answer like, we got all these things happening now, and I'll analyze it and I'll ask a few questions. And then at that point, it's one, for me anyways, it's one where I'm like, okay, well, I'm here if you need me. And I'll follow up 2, 3, 4 times. That's it. If I follow up and they don't answer, that's when a breakup email comes. It's like, listen, we talked about this. This is what I can guarantee you. This is what I can promise you. Based on the lack of response, and, brackets, totally get it. Everybody gets busy. I assume it's not in your cards right now. So when you're looking for these results that I guaranteed you I can get, come back to me. And that's not an ego thing. That's just me being very clear on what I can provide. Because I know, without a shadow of a doubt, I know just as sure as it's going to get dark tonight, that I can help them. And I believe, as a professional sales rep, as a professional consultant, in other words, because I think at this point in time in our industry, if you're still a sales rep, you're losing. I really think you need to focus on that consultant role. Like, how do I really help our customers win? And this is something I've been thinking about nonstop for months now, especially with Bridger and setting a CRM up to really help logistics sales reps, putting tools and AI and all these other functions in a CRM that actually help, not just putting things in to have some cool, shiny toys, right? Like if you look at it from another angle, when ChatGPT came out and all these new GPTs and the GPT store came out, people were able to start sharing. Those were shiny toys and they're pretty cool. Don't get me wrong. Some of them can do some pretty cool things, but it's still just a function. It without your input, without you doing something, it doesn't help, right? So it's a shiny toy that we use. And that's the difference between things that actually work to help you get ahead. So this is the perspective I'm coming from. This is the strategy. This is the process where I think your head needs to be. And it needs to be at that point where, how do we implement things that actually help? And when you know that, like we do, it's almost to the point where, so let me put it like this. When you know that, you almost sit there and second guess, why isn't this person working with me? Like, what did I not say properly for them to understand? And that's the battle you fight with as a consultant. So what I do is at that point, I'll send the breakup email. That's it. Done. And I'll leave it alone because I'm not going to break my back. And this might sound real harsh, but I've been in this a long time. I'm not going to break my back and try and convince somebody that what they're doing is going to put them in the same position a year from now. And what we can do is help them get to their goal. Because I've already done that. There was that period or point in time where they're like, yes, that makes sense. But you see, like everything else, there's this cool down period. And I don't necessarily mean it from, a sales message that gets you hype and you think you're going to take this quantum leap and then you never get to the quantum leap because, it's all bullshit. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is, you share your strategy and they're like, yes, that makes sense. This is where I want my department to go. That makes total sense. But then something comes up and all of a sudden that's priority. So I do believe you got to let that breathe. So there is no one size fits all. When we come to prospecting and going after leads, I will do close to 13 follow-ups. And then I will typically put prospects into an automated sequence. And what I mean by that is I'll do, manual emails, maybe half templatized, half manual, personalization, that kind of stuff. Always doing that to start with. Well, actually, let me rephrase that. On a couple of levels, yes, and on a couple of levels, no. So I'm learning that if you really come in with this really wicked, I'll call it a lead magnet, but a positioning where you say, hey, is this you, or can you raise your hand? You can actually get away with not necessarily personalizing, because if you focus on your client profile, if they have this problem, you meet their need, right? And I believe that. And some people might disagree with me, and that's fine. Everybody has their way. See, this is the big problem when you look at sales training. And I know, back in the day when I first started training people, it was like, this is the way to do it. This is the only way to do it. And I quickly realized, well, that was the way I did it. But what if there's a philosophy? What if there's a strategy that you can sprinkle your own kind of processes in, but the overall framework works? So that's the way I started looking at things. And this is where this comes from, is it's not always a one way to do it. So anyone that says, oh, it has to be personalized, I think is wrong. It's what works for you. I still, to this point, don't do research on a company until somebody raises their hand. Now, you talk to other people and they're like, oh no, you got to know the company. You got to know what they do. Well, I could pretty much tell what type of equipment you're going to need based on the commodity. I think that's one of the first things we realize as a logistics sales professional. But there's also a point where, do I really want to use any of my time looking at things until you raise your hand? And the answer is no. For me, maybe it's different for you. And it is different because in Bridger, we did a poll of our users, and they're like, no, we do research. The majority of them did research. So we built an AI tool to research a company in seconds, as opposed to the average time that came back was 10 to 13 minutes. So we built a tool specifically to do research on a company in seconds. See, that's what I mean by getting the tools that help you move faster. Whatever those tools are, whether it be an email tool that tracks and you can see what you're doing and how you're doing it and what the metrics are, like whatever that case may be. So these are all functions that we're going to be talking about over the next couple of weeks on this show. But in the end, at what point do you stop chasing a lead? And that answer is at the point where you feel it's a waste of time. But make sure you understand the context in which you're connecting. Perfect example. If you're connecting on LinkedIn, right? And you send somebody an invite and they don't answer. And then maybe you withdraw the invite and then send them another invite and they don't answer. Maybe they're not on LinkedIn all the time. Like, go to their profile, check and see if they're posting. You can see all of that. If they're not posting, not commenting, maybe they're not on LinkedIn. Now, yes, there are people that don't post, don't comment, and they're on LinkedIn all the time, and they're just kind of surfing in the background. So there's these things that we don't understand, right? You're sending emails. Maybe your emails are being blocked. And when I say being blocked, just a point where the server is not necessarily giving you like a 500 or a 550 error, meaning the email doesn't exist, but maybe it's going to a catch-all. Maybe their personal assistant. And this is one thing that I realized on a call the other day, in speaking, like, because I go after a lot of CEOs and CTOs and VPs and that, and a lot of them have personal assistants. And I was watching a show where this person had a personal assistant on, and they were saying, okay, so tell me about emails that don't get through. And she was like, I delete 50 sales emails a day for my executive because he doesn't need, and so when you think about that, you might be sending emails. They might never even be getting to the person you want. So what do? Follow up with a phone call. So maybe you send 3-4 emails and then do a phone call. 3-4 emails, do a phone call. 3-4 phone call, then emails, whatever the case may be. So, right, like it's not just a one faucet approach where it's like this is the direct line and it's a single road and there's no Y's, there's no V's, there's no splits. It doesn't happen like that. So I don't know if this session helped you. I hope it did. Just to think about things differently, really. And, for me, when it's a prospect, if I'm not looking for them to raise their hand, if I'm just looking to inform them, I'll probably reach out 3 times. If I'm looking for them to raise their hand, I'll typically reach out until they raise their hand. If it's somebody I've had a meeting with and I've done things with, I'll reach out 4 times after that. And then that's it, because they obviously don't see the value in it. So again, I operate on the Gary Vee mentality. Well, if you don't see the value in it, why am I going to chase you to try and convince you of something? Because here's the thing, and this is one thing I've learned very early on, is when you convince somebody of something, right? Whatever the case may be, however persuasive you may be, I don't care. When you convince them of it, at start, it works. But eventually, their logical mind kicks in. And so would you rather, let's play a little game. Would you rather sign a customer on and in a month they realize that, oh my God, I signed on because of some hype and it's not what it was, and then you have to go through the whole process again? Or would you rather take 2 months and keep that client for 10 years? See, I think that's the difference. That's what we really need to focus on is this person going to be a long-term client? And am I interested? Or am I just going after getting clients every month, like, churning through my clients? And, I don't think so. I think I used to do that. I think we all probably did that when we first started because we just wanted to put numbers on the board. So we're going to, oh, I got a list. Okay, well, I'm going to get on that list and I'm going to give you cheap rates. And then all of a sudden you have that freight for a month and then you lose that freight because somebody gives cheaper rates, right? So it's like this whole process. So just sit down, really think to yourself, like what am I going for? What am I looking for? And then sell to that end, right? Like Stephen Covey, start with the end in mind. So what is the ideal client I'm looking for? Let's sell to that end. If that ideal client requires me to do 13 touches, then that's what that ideal client does. That's my process. And that, I think, will give you more help, ease your mind a little bit more, and give you more perspective on how this all works. Until next time, my friends, remember to go out there, make every call educational, and crush your sales. We'll see you soon.